So this is the section, as I said last night in the introduction, where we push you hard. Okay, and it's warm, but you should all have had caffeine, so hopefully we'll see how we get on. The topic, the title for this lecture is What It Meant to Be Human and Why It Still Matters. What it meant to be human and why it still matters, which is obviously a way too big a topic to cover in the time that we have. So by definition, more will be left unsaid than said, obviously, which you all understand. The first part of the lecture, the talk, will be really introducing you to a whole range of texts in order to illustrate to you there was a broad consensus and understanding of the nature of being human across the board, Jewish and Christian, and to many extents humanists up to a certain point. It's very broad, so you're going to hear a lot of texts from diverse sources just illustrating the point. And in one sense, each text is saying the same thing over and over again, and that's the point, that we get to understand that broad consensus. And obviously, a lot of these texts, especially Jewish and Christian texts, are founded upon and are the result of meditation and thought about the creation narratives in Genesis 1 and 2. So on day 6, in the first creation account, which is Genesis 1:1 through to Genesis 2:3, man is made on the same day as the animals, and yet there's this self-deliberation that introduces, in God, that introduces the idea of creating man. Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. Which wasn't said about the animals, it wasn't said about the plants. So man and animals made on the same day, yet man is made in God's image, animals are not. In the second creation account, in Genesis 2, you have man and beasts being made out of the same material, yet God breathes into man, and he becomes a living soul, and is tasked with, he names the animals, and then you have the creation of Eve. And so there's a different way of expressing the same thing. There is similarity with the beasts and the animals, and there is dissimilarity. And the narrative brings that out. And so the sort of text that we're going to talk about reflect on those realities. But it wasn't just Jewish and Christian texts and biblical texts that thought like this. So I'm going to start with an ancient Near Eastern, a Mesopotamian account of creation at Trahasis. So these are pagans, ancient pagans, reflecting on humanity in their creation myth. It is not for me to do it. The task is Enki's. He it is that cleanses all. Let him provide me the clay so I can do the making. Enki made ready to speak and said to the great gods, on the 1st, 7th, and 15th days of the month, let me establish a purification, a bath. Let one god be slaughtered, then let the gods be cleansed by immersion. Let Nintu mix clay with his flesh and blood. Let that same god and man be thoroughly mixed in the clay. Let us hear the drum for the rest of the time. From the flesh of the god, let a spirit remain. Let it make the living know its sign, lest he be allowed to be forgotten. Let the spirit remain. So you have this ancient pagan creation myth that describes the making of man. And there's a mixture between this earthly substance, this clay, and this god, small g god, who is killed in order to be mixed in with this creation. They're struggling, even way back then, with man's uniqueness over and against the rest of creation. Let's jump forward to Philo, who is contemporaneous with Christ, an Alexandrian Jew, very Hellenized, Greek, writing in Greek. And this is from his questions in Genesis. What is the meaning of the words, "Until thou return to the earth from which thou wast taken"? For man was molded not only from the earth, but also from the divine spirit. First, it is evident that the earthborn creature was compounded out of earth and heaven. And because he did not remain uncorrupted, but made light of the commands of God, turning away from the best and the most excellent part, namely heaven, he gave himself wholly over to the earth, the denser and heavier element. Second, if he had been desirous of virtue, which makes the soul immortal, he would certainly have obtained heaven as his lot. So there again, 2nd century Jewish writer, reflecting on Genesis and the words, until thou return to the earth from which thou wast taken, reflects on the nature of man. There's a heavenly aspect and there is an earthly aspect. Jumping on to another Jewish text, a commentary on the book of Deuteronomy called Sifrei Devarim, and the quoting of a Rabbi Simai. He says this: Rabbi Simai used to say, "Both the soul and body of creatures created from heaven are from heaven. Both the soul and body of creatures created from earth are from earth, except for man, whose soul is from heaven and body is from earth. Therefore, if a man fulfills Torah and the desire of his Father in heaven, he is like the heavenly creatures, as it says, Psalm 82:6, I said you are gods and sons of the Most High, all of you. But if he does not fulfill Torah and the desire of his Father in heaven, he is like the creatures of the earth, as it says, Psalm 82:7, therefore as man you shall die." Now, I don't want you to worry about the text of the psalm and his use of those proof texts. I could talk to you a long time about those, but that's not our topic. But you see the same conclusion. Reflecting on the story of Genesis, you have heavenly creatures, and the Bible as a whole, the angels, heavenly. You have beasts of the field, completely earthly. And you have man, this intermediate sort of creation, part heavenly, part earthly. And then he introduces, a little, as Philo did, this question mark. According to which nature is he going to live? Which will determine his end, which we will come back to later. Theophilus, a Christian, early Christian apologist, 2nd century, writing to Autolycus in a book Ad Autolycum, says something very similar to Sifrei Devarim. But someone will say to us, was man created mortal by nature? Not at all. Was he then created immortal? We do not say this either. God therefore made him neither immortal nor mortal, but, as we have said before, capable of both. If he were to turn to the life of immortality by keeping the commandment of God, he would win immortality as a reward from him, and would become a god, small g. But if he turned to deeds of death, disobeying God, he would be responsible for his own death. See, the teleology of Sifrei Devarim is present in this Christian text related to the creation. Man wasn't created immortal or mortal. There was this intermediate state. Is he earthly or heavenly? Gregory of Nyssa, in the Eastern Church. Man, he says, is twofold. The mean between divine, incorporeal nature and the irrational life of brutes. The same thing. Augustine, City of God. Man is a kind of mean between angels and beasts. The beast being an irrational and mortal animal, the angel a rational and immortal one. While man, inferior to the angel and superior to the beast, and having in common with the one mortality and with the other reason, is a rational and mortal animal. This combination, part heavenly, part earthly. From the Syrian church, Nasai, in his homilies on creation, speaking of the creation of Adam, he made him the nature of angels by the spiritual soul and caused to cling to him the dumb nature by the arrangement of his limbs and body. The same thing again. So you've got the Eastern church, the Western church. You have biblical pre-Christian Jews. You have ancient pagans. They're all wrestling with the same reality and all coming to similar conclusions, but expressing them differently. Aquinas, moving forward into the medieval age. Man is in himself a rational soul of the genus of spiritual substances and in likeness to the heavenly bodies. The body of man is said to have been formed from the slime of the earth, and for this reason man is called a little world, because all creatures of the world are in a way to be found in him. Same thing, expressed differently, with different emphases, but there is this mixture. We could go to Shakespeare, Hamlet. What piece of work is a man? How noble in reason. In form and moving, how express and admirable. In action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. How like a god, but the paragon of animals. There's the same wrestling going on found in Shakespeare, and there are other examples. And then finally, coming into the 17th century. So we're covering a vast space of time. Lucy Hutchinson, Order and Disorder. Thus was the noblest creature the last made, as he in whom the rest perfection had, in whom both parts of the great world were joined, earth in his members, heaven in his mind. So hopefully you've got a sense now over a vast span of time, across a great range of texts and authors from different traditions, both Christian and Jewish and some pagan, wrestling with the same question: what does it mean to be human? What are humans? And reaching similar answers. Obviously the Jewish and Christian answers are much more consistent and alike because the source texts are the same. But the different contexts and the different times that they're talking will change the way that they express it. But thus far, across the board, what does it mean to be human? Mankind is part angel, part beast, or a microcosm of creation, or has a heavenly and an earthly element to them. But not only this, that this unique nature presents a question mark on his end, the teleology. Where is he headed? How will he then live? To which end will he arrive? Will he live according to his heavenly or his beastly nature? Will he achieve a heavenly or a beastly end? So all reflection in these majority of these texts about the makeup of humanity, ontology, what is his being, his makeup, is not separated. It is intimately connected to his end. Last things affect first things. Eschatology, teleology affects ontology. We cannot understand how humans are made up without reference to our end. The two are related. Now, being situated as a mean between angels and beasts raised the question for some, particularly in the medieval period, about the difference to angels. Also in the earlier period, in Jewish texts, they asked the same questions. And the idea of angels have bodies. Some disagreed with this, some dispute it, but there is a thing as an angelic body. And what separates humans, what it meant from angels in relationship to their makeup? And this is where the term flesh took on a very particular meaning. So Remy Brague, a polymath French scholar, brilliant man, said this: man is situated between the animals who have a body and the angels, who are either totally incorporeal or are endowed with a body inaccessible to corruption. If the superior beings are incorporeal, what distinguishes them from men lies in whether they have a body or not. If they have a body that is purer than ours, the difference resides in the fact that our body is of flesh and the angelic body is not. So flesh, sort of, which you see in the biblical text anyway, but in this medieval period became a technical term that underlines the weakness and the fragility of the human body as it pursues its terrestrial pilgrimage. So we've talked about ontology relating to the end. How will we then live in this position of a mean between angels and humans? And our condition is that of being fleshly, which underlines the weakness and fragility of humanity. So thus far, man's position, humanity's position in this ordered creation where he lives in that order, man's fragility signified by the idea that we are flesh. And this terrestrial pilgrimage that we are on is underlined by fragility. And man's end with a question mark. What it means to be human raises the question of our end. Now, as we move into modernity, in many ways, everything changes. Remy Brague again. One might perhaps characterize modernity, and then he has a disclaimer, not without a touch of pedagogical exaggeration. So he understands it's a broad brushstroke, but one might perhaps characterize modernity as the age without angels. As the age without angels. And what does that do to our understanding of man? This presents a challenge, therefore, of locating humanity in the question of what it meant to be human. How do we locate man in the order of the world, and even in understanding who man is and the end of man, where it's heading, when a whole order of being has been removed? That was the challenge of modernity. Brague, interestingly, asked the question, can we recapture a sense of that importance? That is a question facing us, of humanity's importance. And he suggests, and this is very striking when I read this, that computers present that possibility for us. In other words, the challenge of technology and its claims, exaggerated claims, may not just be a challenge. It actually may be an opportunity for us to rediscover what it means to be human. And so I'm suggesting here that the man-angel distinction, what it meant to be human, has teleological implications in regards to our ends. It has ontological reflections that will assist us in how we think about technology and the full court press that we're under to make humans in machines' image. And I talked about language last night and how the tech world wants to apply metaphors of humanity onto machines and the metaphor of machines onto humanity. And it is a deliberate attempt to change how we understand the world. And we need to resist that press. So this loss of origin, destination, and a specific place in an ordered world, in one sense, the story of modernity is one where we don't know who we are or where we are headed. We don't know who we are and we don't know where we are headed. Jacques Ellul, in his book, The Presence of the Kingdom, said, "We do not know whither we are going. We have forgotten our collective ends, and we possess great means. We set huge machines in motion in order to arrive nowhere." We set huge machines in motion in order to arrive nowhere. So thus far, what it meant to be human, across the board, across cultures, across vast swathes of time, and then the challenge of modernity, the age without angels. So I want to pause here just for that, for a moment, and then reflect theologically on ends and purposes. We talked about what it meant to be human is tied to our end as humans. So what do we mean by an end? And how do those ends relate to the purposes that we have in our lives? And here I'm going to draw on the work of John Webster. Because ends and purposes are not the same. Okay, an end is a different thing to a purpose. A purpose is a human intention that shapes how we live. Okay? When we have a purpose in our lives, that's an intention that we have. And that necessarily shapes how we live. An end, by contrast, is not intentional. It is natural. It is given in your nature. Okay? So an end, being natural, is not dependent on human desire or intention. So to speak of the end of a thing is to speak of its completeness or perfection when its nature is fully achieved. So when God created everything, each nature of everything he created had an end that is natural to that thing. Okay. And so John Webster says, our nature, our human nature, presents itself to us as a vocation. That's a beautiful line, a beautiful thought. Our nature presents itself to us as a vocation. To be human is to have a vocation, to have an end that is natural to that nature. And our calling is to understand that end and conform and govern our purposes in life towards that end. So we understand who we are. We understand what is the natural end, God-given end, not a human-made end, God-given. And our responsibility as humans in understanding who we are is to conform and govern all our purposes, what we choose to do, how we choose to live towards that end. Now that is a very, very real challenge because we are made of flesh, that fragile human existence which is fallen. And therefore our purposes, John Webster suggests, are driven sometimes overwhelmingly so by our desires. And our desires are inadequately formed or immoderate or vicious. Those are the words of John Webster. But notice this, our purposes are driven sometimes overwhelmingly so by our desires. Again, we conflate the idea of desire and purpose. We think because I want it, and this, but when we allow our desires to control our purposes, and our desires are often immoderate and inadequately formed, and sometimes vicious, then our purposes are not directed towards the given end of our nature as God has provided. Webster goes on, moreover, our absorption in ourselves and our fondness for self-rule, we love it, may so overwhelm us that the purposes we set for ourselves may come to eclipse or replace the ends which are given with our nature and which hold out our good. So we can see here how we are, who we are in creation is understood in relationship to who we will be in the new creation. Because that is the end God has purposed for us. God created us with that end in mind. And we are to conform our purposes in life towards that end, and we need to realize that that is a challenge. It is a constant battle because our fondness for ruling ourselves and our inadequately formed desires causing us to live differently. You might say, so I thought this was about technology. Tim. So how do we tie all these threads together with regards to being human and technology? I suggested last night in the introduction that the challenges of tech that tech confront us do so at a time when we are least prepared to deal with it. Just because of the nature of the education and the training and the society we live in. But in light of what we've just said here, it's even more of a challenge because we have lost our moorings on what it means to be human. We don't even know who we are anymore. Society as a whole, we have no idea. We no longer fit into an ordered cosmos created by God where we have our place as creatures in the order that God has established. We no longer have any idea of the ends given to us in our nature by the God who created us. And we are left to determine means of living to no specific end other than our own pleasure, enjoyment, or ease. As such, when the technological world promises us escapes from our fleshly nature, our animal nature, at the same time as promising godlike powers, we jump at the chance. But does tech offer that to us? It's commonplace to cite the similarity between the offer of the serpent in the garden, eat this fruit and you shall be like God, to the offer that the technium, remember that, the technium, that superorganism as Kelly likes to call it, but we're not going to call it that because it's not an organism. But that offer that the technium offers us with. Anton Barbecue in his The Web of Our Own Making talks about the aspirations of the tech world. He said, these are spiritual aspirations, a specific vision of what our human end should be and how we should shape our future toward it so that unbound from nature we may become as gods. He says, when you present the vision of the tech elite who are controlling all the developments and everything that is coming to us, what are their aspirations? And they make them clear. They're not shy. You don't have to go into the dark web to find out what their aspirations are. They're open about it. It's a future that is unbound from nature that we may become as gods. Now, we are attuned to the obvious deceits of longevity and transhumanism, perhaps. We have not given sufficient thought to the more subtle ways technology deceives us. And let's look at one example. Barbecue again. Digital technology enables you to act on what you think. It abridges the usual span between willing and effective doing. Barbecue describes this as a simulacrum of omnipotence, i.e. an imitation of omnipotence. You want to do something, you can do it. That's what digital technology, the speed, the efficiency. You have a desire, it's yours. That's what it's looking at. You think something, you do it. Now, on a basic level, it's I want to buy it, I bought it, and then it arrives. Barbecue says that this is basic to the structure and experience digital affordances themselves. And this is a godlike power. Remember, Jonah is on the boat fleeing from his mission to go to call Nineveh to repentance. And the storm comes up. And they question him, who are you? Whose God do you serve? Where you come from? How does he describe God? The God who made heaven and earth. Whatever he desires, he does. That was a sufficient saying that this is what God is like. There is no time lapse between his desire and his action, or his desire and his ability to act. He can do it. Barbecue again, this, he says, is the aspiration of the digital, and in some sense all modern technology, to make the world fully pliant to my will. I will something, it can happen. So digital technology is a natural technology of creatures who have lost their place in the divine order of creation, who have no given nature by a creator and no given end true to that nature through which one conforms one's purposes and goals. It is dangling out to you this sort of primeval temptation to be like God, and you just think you're shopping or doing what you want to do more efficiently. But each little thing is behind it is the plan. They want to make the world fully pliant to your will. Whatever you want, you can do. But this is not who we are. Our nature presents it to ourselves as a vocation. We are to conform our purposes away from our inadequately formed, immoderate, and sometimes vicious fallen selves, away from our self-absorption and our fondness for self-rule. We need to recover a vision of who we are, where we sit in the created order, and not allow technology or any other deceptive other to eclipse or replace the God-ordained ends which are given with our nature and which hold out our good. This is a lifelong task and an essential element of a Christian education. Digital technology, Barbecue has said, is cogently a dehumanizing force. If you look at the world of technology, ultimately, it's selling itself to you as making you your best self. It is ultimately a dehumanizing force. Christian education is the ultimate humanizing force. It should be, that seeks to recover what it means to be truly human, what true human flourishing looks like, and aids us in conforming our purposes to our God-ordained ends and where true human glory lies, as opposed to the creature comforts and ease we are sold. Perhaps Remy Bragg is right. Perhaps the age of the digital technology affords us an opportunity to recover what has been lost. Perhaps the dehumanizing elements of modern technology, and this is our prayer, will act as a siren call to those of us whose ears are not covered metaphorically as well as literally by noise-canceling headphones. And so bring about a recovery of what it means to be human and why that matters both now and for eternity. But recovering that element of who we are, this is why it matters so much, what it means to be human, and why our place in the order of creation both exalts us and humbles us at the same time. And sets before us a glorious end, future, which we are to conform our purposes around. And this isn't your traditional eschatological talk. This is how the world will end now. Behave as you should in this way in order for this end to happen. It's not pre-mill or post-mill or a-mill or whatever like that. It's simple Christian living. You're aware of the fragility of your flesh. And if you're not, you should be, because it's fragile. And you're on a terrestrial pilgrimage and you're being bombarded to escape that nature in other ways than the ones that God has ordained. And so recovering this vision, whether you describe it as medieval or biblical or however, it's a vision that teaches us what it means to be human and what our ends are. So Selden College, which is where I will end before maybe having a chance for question and answers and discussion, Selden we want to form our students in keeping with who we are as creatures. I don't get to say who I am. God has said who I am in creation and in redemption. I fit in with that, not I don't make the world fit in with who I think I should be. So Selden wants to form our students in keeping with who we are as creatures, made in the image of God, with the God-ordained end of partaking in the divine nature through his great and precious promises. Because there is the theological term theosis, divination. Athanasius' classic definition, God became man so that man might become God, small g. There is a deceitful distortion of the truth that is held out from the Garden of Eden all the way through of this is, God-like end. Yes, but not how you define it, not the way you say. We want to do it God's way. And Christian education is a part of that, is a humanizing force in society as a whole and in the lives of individuals. And Selden College wants to recover that and further that end. And some of the ways we'll do that in relationship to the challenges of technology, I will return to on Friday. But that's a talk for another day.